The smell. Always the smell. But not the sterile chill of Madigan Army Medical Center, nor the bloody stench, tinged with rotten pine, from that mountain cliff in Montana. Here, in the heart of the Nevada desert, in the concrete womb of the vault, the air smelled different. Ozone, overheated metal, machine oil, and a faint, almost subconscious note of fear, not mine. The fear of those who worked beside me, who saw what I had become. The helicopter touched down on the subterranean landing pad with the soft hiss of hydraulics. The moment the blades stopped spinning, they were there to meet me. Two figures in sterile suits, looking more like astronauts than medics, and a silent security detail, assault rifles at the ready. Standard procedure. Physically, I was almost back to normal. Regeneration worked wonders. The deep gouges from the Wendigo's claws had sealed during the flight, leaving only a tight itch beneath the thick fur I hadn't yet managed to retract. Broken ribs mended in a couple of hours. But something had shifted. The beast within had grown, louder. The fury of the battle on the cliff hadn't vanished without a trace. It left its mark like a brand seared onto my soul. The hunger the kind food couldn't satisfy grew sharper, more insistent. It demanded movement, the hunt, combat, demanded blood. Psychologically, I was on the edge. The howl that had ripped from my throat over the Wendigo's fallen body still echoed in my skull. It wasn't the cry of a man triumphing over a monster. It was the howl of a beast finding its place in the food chain of terror. And that thought scared me more than the Wendigo's fangs or the inoperable sarcoma. Who was I now? Aidan Barkley, the man who saved lives, or just SOCOM's attack dog trained to hunt other monsters? The line blurred thinner with each day, each fight. I was led through a labyrinth of corridors, past humming server banks and labs with sterile containment units where perhaps right now they were creating new lycanthropes, or studying the remains of those who couldn't handle the transformation. My personal bay greeted me with its familiar emptiness and the smell of disinfectant. But before I was left alone with myself and the recorder, my only confidant, there was the briefing. The briefing room was the polar opposite of my bay. Dark wood, leather armchairs, a massive screen on the wall, and Lieutenant Colonel Cross, unchanged granite profile, cold blue eyes, immaculate uniform devoid of insignia. Beside him sat several analysts, pale individuals with tired eyes, surrounded by stacks of folders and glowing tablets. The air was thick with tension and the smell of strong coffee. "Sergeant Barkley," Cross's voice was steady, almost mechanical. "Welcome back. Your work in Montana was effective. The Wendigo threat has been neutralized." He paused, giving me a chance to speak, but I remained silent. What was there to say? Glad to serve? Had fun tearing the creature to pieces? Cross nodded as if reading my thoughts. However, as we suspected, Black Hollow was just one outbreak, the tip of the iceberg. A map of the United States appeared on the huge screen, peppered with red dots. There were more than I expected. Arizona, Louisiana, Appalachia, Washington, Oregon. Even a few points outside the country, Canada, Mexico. Over the past few weeks, we've registered a surge in anomalous activity across the country, one of the analysts began, nervously adjusting his glasses. Disappearances, especially in remote areas. Witness accounts describing creatures that shouldn't exist. Strange ritualistic symbols similar to those you discovered in Montana. Blurred photographs, fragments of security camera footage, police reports flashed across the screen. Distorted shadows, glowing eyes in the dark, unnaturally long limbs, massive tracks on the ground. and again, those eerie, angular runes, drawn in blood or paint on rocks, trees, the walls of abandoned buildings. The cult of the hungry, Cross continued, a steely note entering his voice. This isn't just scattered groups of crazed fanatics. It's a network, organized, widespread, with a clear objective. They don't just worship these creatures, they summon them, awaken them. They call them the branches of hunger. A new slide, schematic drawings of various mythological creatures alongside reports of recent incidents. The Wendigo in Montana was just one branch, another analyst explained, pointing a laser at the screen. Based on the collected data, they're working with different types of entities. In Arizona, the signature points to creatures known in local legends as dogmen, humanoid canids, fast, organized, hunting in packs. In the Louisiana swamps, something amphibious, stealthy, tied to water and decay. In Appalachia, the classic Sasquatch or Bigfoot, but apparently anomalously aggressive and strong. The hungry have found a way to bind these ancient creatures. Cross spoke again. Perhaps through rituals, perhaps artifacts. They aren't just trying to unleash them. They're trying to control them, use them. The goal is still unclear, but the scale is alarming. This is no longer a local problem, Sergeant. This is a national-level threat. I stared at the map, at the red dots, at the schematic monsters. The Wendigo had been a nightmare. But the thought of creatures like that, different, each with its own horrors, being awakened across the country. A chill ran down my spine despite the beast's inner heat. The battle hunger inside me responded with a low growl of anticipation. Work. There would be a lot of work. Your objective, Sergeant. Cross looked me straight in the eye, his gaze hard as steel, is to investigate the three most active hotspots: Arizona, Louisiana, Appalachia, suppress the threat, neutralize the branches of hunger. If possible, collect samples, biological, ritual artifacts, and most importantly, find the connection. Find the cult leaders, determine their ultimate goal. He paused, letting the scale of the task sink in. 3 different monsters, 3 different theaters of operation. And me, the only effective weapon against them. You understand this will be dangerous, Cross added almost indifferently. Likely more dangerous than Montana. These creatures could be stronger, more cunning than the Wendigo, and the cultists will be expecting you. I nodded. Words were unnecessary. I signed the contract. I took the serum. I became this thing. There was no turning back. Fear? Yes, it was there. Fear of failure. Fear of losing control. Fear of finally dissolving into the beast. But stronger than fear was duty? No, not exactly. More like grim determination, and that same battle hunger demanding release. We start with Arizona. Cross pointed to a dot on the map where desert plains met rocky canyons. Recon reports increased attacks on livestock and isolated farms. Locals talk about wolves on 2 legs. Very fast, acting in concert. The ritual activity signature there is escalating. Deploy immediately. The helicopter is ready. The briefing was over. The analysts rustled their papers. Cross stood up. I remained seated for another moment, looking at the map, at the red dots marking new battlefields. Arizona, dogmen, a pack. This wouldn't be a hunt for a lone target like the Wendigo. This would be a fight against an organized force. I rose. The beast within stretched, flexing muscles. The hunger demanded action. I headed for the exit towards the armory where my silver blades and modified weaponry awaited. The ozone tang of Luciferin 13 already tickled my nostrils. The return to the vault was over before it truly began. A new hunt was calling. and I walked towards it, feeling the moon's scar invisible, yet real, begin to pulse beneath my skin once more. Arizona greeted us with dry, scorching air. Even the pre-dawn chill couldn't mask the daytime heat absorbed by the sand and rock. The Black Hawk dropped me and a small support team, 3 soldiers in desert camo, armed to the teeth, onto a dusty plateau far from the nearest town. Their faces were hidden by masks and tactical goggles, but tension was palpable in every movement. They knew what they were likely up against. Or rather, they thought they knew. Reality always surpasses rumor. The helicopter's roar faded into the distance, leaving us alone with the desert silence. The vast sky, studded with bright stars, pressed down with its immensity. The air smelled of dust, sagebrush, and something else. A thin, barely perceptible musky scent of wild animal. And beneath it, the familiar nauseating hint of ritual smoke and old blood. The trail was here. Our contact, a deputy sheriff from the local county, waited for us by a battered old pickup truck. His name was Ben, Native American. He eyed our group skeptically, his gaze lingering on me. I was in human form, but apparently something about me, my eyes, my posture, or just the predator's aura, gave away my true nature. He hadn't asked questions when Cross contacted his superiors via secure line and ordered full cooperation with the federal team. But doubt and old fear were clear in his eyes. "They came again last night," Ben said quietly, nodding towards the distant hills vanishing in the pre-dawn haze. "Old man Henderson's ranch. All the livestock slaughtered, not eaten, just torn apart." Henderson locked himself in the house, fired through the windows, said there were many of them, walked on 2 legs, like... He hesitated, searching for the word. "Like dogs?" suggested the support team leader, Sergeant Riggs. Ben shook his head. "No, not dogs. The old ones spoke of Shaynaldi, skinwalkers, sorcerer shapeshifters, those who made pacts with the dark desert spirits for power and speed. They walk on their hind legs, have canine heads, and see better in the dark than coyotes." He looked at me. "They say you can't kill them with ordinary bullets." "We don't exactly have ordinary bullets," Riggs muttered, patting a pouch, likely holding phosphorus rounds. We piled into the bed of Ben's pickup. The ride was bumpy, dust filling our noses and lungs. I sat with my eyes closed but not resting. My heightened senses scanned the surroundings. The smell of fear hung over this land like a thick shroud. The fear of people in the small towns scattered across the desert. The fear of animals sensing the approach of an unnatural predator. And beneath it all, the sharp, exciting scent of the dogmen themselves. There were many, and they were close. The pickup stopped at the foot of a narrow canyon with sheer red sandstone walls. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky orange and violet. But the canyon floor was still lost in deep shadow. "Tracks lead here," Ben said, pointing to prints in the sand. "Large, wolf-like, but deeper, and lots of them." Riggs ordered his men to spread out, check the flanks. I moved forward with Ben and Riggs. The air in the canyon was still and heavy. The dogman's scent intensified, mixing with the smell of blood and ozone. My own scent? Or ambush? I knew it a split second before it happened. A sharp whistle cut the air. A scream from one of Riggs's men on the right flank, cut short by a wet gurgle. And then they appeared. They didn't emerge from behind rocks. They seemed to materialize from the shadows. A dozen figures, moving on 2 legs with incredible speed. Taller than a man, with powerful canine heads, burning yellow eyes, and fanged muzzles dripping saliva. Their bodies were covered in short, coarse fur of a dirty brown color, and black claws glinted on their long hands. Dogmen. The legend was alive, and it was hungry. They attacked with coordination like a well-trained spec ops unit. Not a chaotic mob, but coordinated groups. 2 charged Riggs and Ben. 3 came at me while the others circled around, cutting off our retreat and attacking the second soldier on the left flank. Short bursts of automatic fire erupted. Riggs's men opened up. Bullets hit home, tearing out clumps of fur and flesh, but the creatures seemed oblivious to the wounds. They moved with terrifying purpose. Riggs and Ben fired back, retreating towards the cliff face. I saw one dogman leap onto Riggs, knocking him down. Ben shot the creature in the head with his old revolver. The skull exploded in a spray of gore, but even the headless body continued to twitch, trying to reach the deputy with its claws. 3 attacked me. Their movements were lightning fast, their claw strikes lethal. I dodged using human agility, but it wasn't enough. One raked its claws across my shoulder, tearing through my jumpsuit and skin. The pain was sharp, but familiar. It woke the beast. "Sergeant!" Riggs's shout pinned against the rock. No time to think. Human form wasn't enough. I allowed the transformation to begin. Not the full change like on the cliff with the Wendigo, but partial. Controlled. Skin crackled, muscles tightened. Claws erupted from my fingers, lengthening, sharpening. Fangs bared in a snarl. Vision intensified, the world grew sharper, the dogman's movements slightly slower. I still looked mostly human, but the predator within was awake. I surged forward, meeting the attacking dogmen. My strikes were different now, faster, stronger. Claws tore through their tough fur and flesh. I moved between them, dodging and countering. One tried to grab my throat, but I slammed my claws into its chest, shattering ribs. It howled and staggered back. The second swung, but I caught its paw, twisted the joint with a sickening crack, and punched its muzzle with my free hand, breaking its jaw. The third dogman leaped back, assessing the situation. Something like surprise flickered in its yellow eyes. Or recognition. It let out a short, barking cry, a signal. Instantly, the other creatures, those pressing Riggs and Ben, and those who had dealt with the second flank guard, broke off their attack and retreated, melting back into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. Silence. Heavy, broken only by my ragged breathing and the groans of the wounded Riggs. The fight lasted maybe a minute, but felt like an eternity. One support soldier was dead, the other badly wounded. Riggs had bites and scratches. Ben was unharmed but pale as a sheet. I looked down at my hands. Claws still extended dogman blood dripping onto the sand. I forced them to retract, feeling a dull ache in my joints. The beast within was displeased. It wanted more. It wanted the hunt. What was that, Barkley? Riggs rasped, getting to his feet, looking at me with a new expression, a mix of fear and respect. "Trouble," I answered curtly, examining the bodies of the 2 dogmen I'd taken down. And then I saw it, sending a chill down my spine. On the neck of one dogman, beneath the matted fur, was a leather collar, and burned into it, a symbol. The same angular rune I'd seen in Montana, the rune of the cult of the hungry. Ben came closer, his face growing even darker. "Night Coyote Mine," he said, looking at the symbol. "Old, abandoned mine a couple miles from here. They say strange things happen there. Natives avoid it. Say the ground there is hungry." The den. We'd found the den. The cultists weren't just summoning the dogmen. They were breeding them, training them, using them like guard dogs for their rituals. I looked at the body of the second dogman, the one I'd hit in the chest. He was still breathing, or rather rasping, choking on blood. But something was wrong. His features weren't entirely beastly. Beneath the coarse fur, remnants of human skin were visible, the bone structure distorted but still vaguely human, and the eyes, yellow, animalistic, but deep within flickered a spark of horror, awareness. He looked at me, his shattered muzzle falling open. He whispered, the words barely audible through the bloody gurgle. Gathering, shards, sacrifice, in the swamp. She waits. Then his eyes rolled back, and he went still, half human, a victim of a ritual or a failed experiment. Gathering shards, sacrifice in the swamp. What did it mean? A connection to Louisiana? Or something more? I looked deeper into the canyon, where the other dogmen had vanished, towards the abandoned mine. The hunt was just beginning, and it promised to be even bloodier. The night coyote mine opened its dark maw at the base of a sun-scorched slope. The air here was still thick, smelling of ancient dust, rusted metal, and something else. A sickening mix of animal musk, old blood, and the cloying, sweet smoke of unknown incense. We stood at the entrance. Me, Riggs leaning on Ben Eagle Feather's shoulder, and Bennett, who we'd barely managed to drag out of the canyon. The young soldier was pale, his breathing shallow and ragged. A dogman's claw had torn through his body armor and deep into his chest. "He can't be moved?" Ben shook his head after examining Bennett's wound. "And Riggs needs help. I'll call for evac and backup, but the signal's weak here. I'll have to climb higher." And in there, Riggs nodded towards the mine's dark abyss, wincing from the pain in his injured leg. Could be hostages, and those things, and whoever controls them. He looked at me. "Can you handle this alone, Barkley?" There was no doubt of my abilities in his voice, more concern. He'd seen what I could do in the canyon, but fending off a pack attack was one thing. Assaulting a den alone was another. I nodded. There was no time to wait for backup. Every lost hour could cost hostages their lives, and only I could move fast enough and quiet enough to stand a chance. The beast within purred in agreement. A solo hunt. Its element. "I'll go." My voice sounded deeper, rougher than I expected. "Call for evac. Take care of Bennett. I'll make contact when I can. Or I won't." Ben nodded, his weathered face grim. "Be careful. They say this mine doesn't like outsiders, especially like you." He looked at me again with that piercing gaze, as if seeing not the man, but the beast beneath the skin. I checked my weapons, FNX 45 pistol with phosphorus rounds, 2 Luciferin 13 blades on my belt. I'd left the broken rifle in the canyon. I'd have to make do with what I had, and what I'd become. Stepping into the mine's darkness was like entering another world. Heavy, stale air hit my face. My helmet light cut through the gloom, revealing decaying wooden timbers coated in slime and cobwebs, rusted rails disappearing into the unknown. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the steady drip of water somewhere deeper in and my own breathing, which seemed deafeningly loud. My heightened senses were on full alert. Smell picked up every note of this underground hell. Damp stone, rotting wood, the sharp scent of dogman, the cloying sweetness of ritual smoke, and the metallic tang of blood, fresh and old. Hearing caught the faintest noises. The creak of dry beams, the scuttling of rats in the debris, the far-off scrape of claws on rock, and a barely audible monotonous chanting. They were here, and they were busy. I moved quickly but silently like a shadow. Pause. I let the transformation manifest partially claws, heightened senses, but remaining mostly human externally, tread softly, leaving no trace on the dusty floor. Runes of the hungry appeared more frequently on the walls, painted in orange. Some were very fresh. The cult was active. Soon I stumbled upon the kennels. Rebar cages, broken chains, gnawed animal bones, and human remains. Scraps of clothing, boots, dark stains on the floor. Nausea rose in my throat, but I suppressed it. Cold, calculated fury filled the void. These creatures and their masters would pay for this. The chanting grew louder. It came from a large cavern ahead, lit by flickering light. I pressed against the wall, peering around the corner. A huge, underground chamber. In the center, a bonfire and a crude stone altar. On the altar, 3 bound people, eyes wide with terror. Around them, 5 robed cultists, swaying to their eerie chant. A priest with a ritual knife stood by the altar, his face hidden by a hood. And before him, back towards me, loomed him, the Alpha Dog Man. Huge, black, radiating primal power. The priest was making cuts on the prisoner's arms, collecting blood in a bowl, whispering something to the Alpha. A ritual of empowerment was underway. No time for a plan, only instinct. I exploded from around the corner like an arrow loosed from a bow. 2 cultists by the fire dropped without understanding what happened. My claws slit their throats. A third raised an old shotgun. The blast echoed through the cavern. Buckshot burned my shoulder, but I was already on him, knocking the weapon aside and snapping his neck. The 4th and 5th charged me with machetes. I met them with a snarl and the steel of silver blades. A few moments, and they too lay on the floor. The priest and the Alpha turned. The priest shrieked with fury and surprise. The Alpha let out a deafening roar and charged me. It was incredibly fast and strong. The phosphorus rounds from my FNX-45 left smoking burns on its hide, but only slowed it for fractions of a second. Its claws tore through the air, striking sparks from the stone. I dodged, fired, struck with the silver blades. The fight became a chaotic dance of death around the altar and the terrified hostages. I knew. As long as the priest lived, the Alpha would draw strength from the ritual, its wounds healing too quickly. Accept the gift, child of hunger. Become the embodiment of our faith. The priest screamed, raising his hands. The Alpha roared, and its body began to change. Its eyes filled with blood, its fur bristled. Ghostly silhouettes of howling hounds flickered around it. They lunged at me, their icy bites burning, draining my strength. The Alpha struck with new, monstrous force, throwing me against the wall. I struggled to my feet. Pain from wounds, the chill of the spectral bites, the Alpha's roar, and the priest's mad laughter merged into a cacophony of hell. The beast within surged, demanding I abandon control, give in to pure rage. A little more, and I'd lose myself. I had to act, desperately, illogically. Ignoring the spectral hounds biting me from all sides, I lunged not at the Alpha, but at the priest. He didn't expect it. He stumbled back, trying to shield himself with his staff. The Alpha roared and leaped after me, but I was faster. I threw one of my silver blades. It struck the priest squarely in the chest, piercing his robe and the hidden protective amulet beneath. The priest gasped, eyes widening in pain and surprise. The ritual broke. The spectral hounds flickered and vanished. The Alpha Dogman froze for an instant, as if its connection to the power source was severed. This was my chance. I spun towards it, the second blade already in hand. We met in a final, furious clash. Its claws tore my side, but my fangs were already sinking into its throat, and the silver blade plunged deep beneath its ribs, seeking the heart. It thrashed in my grip, choking on blood, its immense strength fading. After several long, terrible seconds, It went limp and collapsed onto the floor. Silence. Heavy, thick smelling of blood and the ozone from the silver. I stood, swaying over the bodies of my enemies. Wounds burned, but regeneration was already doing its work. I approached the priest. He was dead, but his hand clutched a small, dull amulet of dark stone depicting a swamp tree and scaly creatures. "Feed in the mire. She waits." The words of the dying half-breed from the canyon echoed in my head. So it was true. Next stop, Louisiana. I cut the ropes binding the hostages. They stared at me, at the creature covered in blood and fur, with burning yellow eyes, with mute terror, but also a glimmer of hope. "Get out," I growled. "To the exit, quickly! They'll meet you there!" They scrambled away, stumbling and looking back. I was left alone amidst the carnage in the heart of the mountain. The beast within was sated, but not calm. The fury of the fight left a deep scar. I sat on the cold stone beside the alpha dogman's body, trying to still the trembling in my hands and force myself back into human form. The sound of an approaching helicopter, caught by my heightened hearing, was still very distant. There was a long wait ahead in the company of the dead and the echoes of my own instincts. The loneliness in this victory was almost unbearable. Louisiana greeted us with oppressive humidity and the thick, heavy smell of mud, decaying plants, and myriad insects. The air was so dense it felt like you could cut it with a knife. After the dry heat of Arizona, this was another world, green, viscous, full of hidden life and hidden death. We set up base in a small, semi-abandoned settlement on the edge of the vast Atchafalaya Basin. A few leaning stilt houses, a rusty pier, and a bar with a dim sign reading "Grapes of Wrath," the only place with any lingering life. The locals, descendants of Cajuns, fishermen, and hunters, watched us, outsiders in tactical gear, with unconcealed suspicion and fear. They knew something unnatural was happening in their swamps. 5 people had vanished here in recent weeks. 3 tourists who dared to kayak deep into the bayous, and 2 local hunters who knew the swamps like the back of their hands. No bodies, no trace. Only empty boats found tangled in Spanish moss. Our arsenal now included hovercraft, the only way to move quickly through these labyrinths of water, mud, and cypress knees. Thermal imagers became our primary eyes in the murky water and dense thickets. But even with the best equipment, the swamp inspired a primal dread. It felt alive, breathing, watching. Every rustle in the reeds, every splash in the water made us jump. I felt their presence almost immediately. The scent was different, unlike the dry musk of the dogman or the rotten sweetness of the wendigo. It was the stench of stagnant water, decaying fish, and something sharp, ammonia-like reptilian. It was fainter than the other branches of hunger, but it permeated everything, clinging to clothes and skin. Local legend spoke of the Rougarou, a werewolf said to roam the swamps, but more often mentioned other beings. The Grunch, the Latish, swamp devils. Half-human, half-reptile creatures with gills, webbed feet, and claws, capable of sliding silently underwater and dragging victims into the mire. Old men in the bar whispered about the bloody dusk when the water in the channels turns red and eerie clicking sounds drift from the fog. They said it was the time when the swamp spirits came out to hunt. Our first foray deep into the swamps confirmed our worst fears. We found the missing tourists' campsite, a ripped tent, scattered belongings, signs of a struggle in the sticky mud, and bones. Human bones, gnawed clean, carefully hung from cypress branches like grotesque Christmas ornaments, and slime. thick, translucent slime with a sharp ammonia smell coated tree trunks and reeds. In some places, reeds were woven into strange, dense nets blocking waterways, as if something intelligent was setting traps. That night, the nightmare became real. We made a temporary camp on a small patch of dry land, setting up a perimeter and motion sensors. I didn't sleep, listening to the swamp's nocturnal chorus. The beast within was restless. It sensed danger, not from a single enemy, but from the environment itself. The attack came suddenly, without warning. The sensors didn't trip. The creatures emerged directly from the water, silent as shadows. I only heard a soft splash and a short cry from the sentry at the edge of the camp. Then they were among us. Tall, emaciated figures covered in gray-green scales that glistened in the damp moonlight. Their limbs were long and thin, with webbing between their fingers and claws sharp as needles. Their heads were flat serpentine with large, black, lidless eyes and narrow gill slits on the sides of their necks. They moved incredibly fast in jerky bursts, making soft, clicking sounds. 2 soldiers from the new support team were grabbed and dragged into the water before they could react. A third opened fire, but the creatures moved too quickly, their scales seeming to deflect bullets. One leaped onto him, plunging its claws into his chest. I was already on my feet, the transformation happening on its own almost instantly. Rage flooded me, mixed with revulsion for these slick, cold things. I charged into the fray, my claws tearing through scales and flesh, fangs sinking into thin necks. The silver blades left smoking burns on their bodies, eliciting high-pitched hissing shrieks. But there were so many. They crawled from the water, from the reeds, dropped from trees. They worked together, trying to surround, grab, drag us under. One soldier, Sergeant Miller, a veteran of several campaigns, fought off an attacker with the butt of his rifle. Another crept up behind him, already raising a clawed hand to strike. I leaped, knocking the creature down, and sank my teeth into its throat. Hot, thick blood, dark, almost black, spurted onto my muzzle. And in that moment, something snapped. The smell of blood, the fury of battle, the primal instinct of a predator defending its pack. The red haze clouded my vision again. I tore and slashed, not distinguishing between enemy and... Miller recoiled from me as I, having dispatched another creature, turned towards him with a snarl, my eyes burning with madness. My claws were inches from his face. "Barkley, friendly!" His cry, full of terror, cut through the fog of rage. I froze. The image of Miller's frightened face, the smell of his sweat and fear, it hit me like a bucket of cold water. I forced myself back, shaking my head, trying to clear the bloodlust. The beast within howled in frustration but obeyed. This time, the creatures, seeing their attack falter and having lost several of their own, vanished as quickly as they appeared, diving into the dark water, leaving behind only the corpses of their kin, the smell of ammonia, and 3 dead soldiers from our team. We were left alone on the small island in the middle of the hostile swamp. Miller looked at me with poorly concealed fear. The other survivors avoided my gaze. I had almost crossed the line again. The beast was getting stronger, and controlling it was becoming harder. It became clear. These swamp creatures were just soldiers, pawns, controlled by someone or something greater. The entity the Dogman priest had called She, the heart of the mire. And to end this nightmare, we had to find it and rip it out. The old men in the settlement spoke of the cursed church, an abandoned chapel in the deepest part of the swamps, built by early settlers and long swallowed by the mire. They said the devil himself resided there, and that the swamp creatures crawled out from that place. That was our destination. Into the heart of darkness. The journey to the cursed church was hell. We navigated 2 small, flat-bottomed boats through a maze of narrow channels choked with thick reeds and scum. By day, the sun blazed, the humid air hung still, swarming with mosquitoes and biting flies. By night, the swamp came alive with myriad sounds: frog croaks, cicada chirps, distant alligator bellows, and the eerie, clicking chorus of unseen creatures watching us from the darkness. Tension mounted. We lost another soldier. He simply vanished from the stern of the boat during a brief stop. No cry, no splash, as if erased from reality. The remaining team, me, Sergeant Miller and Privates Hendricks and Chen, were on edge. Their eyes held a feverish glint, fingers nervously gripping their weapons. My own nerves were stretched taut. The beast within thrashed, sensing the proximity of the main enemy, anticipating the fight. Signs of the cult of the hungry became clearer. Fresh runes, drawn in blood, appeared on cypress roots emerging from the water. Creepy dolls woven from Spanish moss, algae, and human hair hung in the branches. Sometimes the current brought scraps of clothing or parts of the missing people's bodies. The cultists were performing their rituals here, feeding the swamp entity, preparing it for something. The cursed church wasn't exactly a church. It was the ruins of an old stone structure on a small rise in the middle of the bog, almost completely consumed by a gigantic gnarled cypress tree. Its roots, thick as pythons, entwined the stones, plunging deep into the water and mud. Only fragments of walls and a half-collapsed bell tower remained, resembling a crooked finger pointing accusingly at the sky. Everything was coated in green slime and muck. The stench here was unbearable, a suffocating mix of rot, ammonia, and blood. This was the lair, the heart of the mire. The moment we docked at the rotting planks, they attacked. Swamp creatures swarmed from everywhere, from under the water, from behind ruined walls, dropping from the cypress branches. There were more than last time. They moved faster, more ferociously. We opened fire, falling back towards the ruins. The rattle of automatic weapons mingled with the creatures' hissing shrieks and the clicking of their jaws. Miller and his men worked together, covering each other, but the creatures kept coming, their black eyes burning with cold hatred. I was already in full combat form, my claws and fangs tearing through scaly flesh. The silver blades left terrible burns on their bodies. I fought through their ranks, trying to reach the center of the ruins towards the giant cypress. I felt it. The main enemy was there. Suddenly, the world distorted. The ruin walls wavered, the air thickened, filled with ghostly images. I saw the faces of fallen comrades, those lost in Arizona and those just dragged away by the swamp creatures. They reached for me, their eyes full of mute reproach. I heard cries of pain, whispers of terror. Illusions. The cult priest was here. "Don't give in, it's a trick!" Miller shouted, but his voice trembled. I saw Hendricks recoil, firing into empty space, while Chen froze, staring blankly ahead. I had to find the priest, break his spell. I roared, driving back the phantoms, and charged towards the base of the giant cypress. He stood there, in a niche formed by the tree's roots. A figure in a dark robe embroidered with symbols resembling seaweed and fish bones. In his hands he held a staff of gnarled wood topped with an alligator skull. His face was hidden by the hood, but I felt a wave of cold, evil power radiating from him. He whispered something, and the cypress roots around him writhed like living snakes. But he wasn't alone. From the murky water at the tree's roots, something began to rise. Huge, humanoid, but utterly alien. A body coated in a thick layer of ooze, muck, and glistening scales. an enormous head with bulging fish eyes and a wide-fanged maw, long arms with webbed paws and powerful claws. The Bog Mother, the embodiment of the swamp's horror. It rose to its full 10-foot height, radiating such cold and ancient malice that even the beast within me froze for an instant. At last, worthy food, the priest rasped, his voice like rustling dry leaves. The Bog Mother let out a gurgling roar and moved towards me, scattering clumps of mud and ooze. Its strikes were slow but incredibly powerful. One swing of its massive paw sent me crashing against the ruin wall. Stones rained down. I scrambled up, dodging the next blow. I had to act fast. The illusion still plagued my men. The swamp creatures pressed their attack. I couldn't fight the Bog Mother and hunt the priest simultaneously. The solution came instantly. Destroy the power source. The altar. The giant cypress. I distracted the Bog Mother with a series of quick attacks with the silver blades, forcing it back a step. Then, using all my strength and speed, I lunged for the tree. The priest thrust his staff forward, trying to stop me with an energy blast, but I slipped past, feeling only a searing cold. My claws sank into the cypress bark. It was hard as stone but yielded. I tore at it, ripping away chunks of wood, trying to reach the core. The tree groaned, a low, vibrating sound that resonated painfully in my head.
"No, don't you dare!" the priest shrieked.
The Bog Mother turned and charged towards me, but it was too late. I reached the soft, pulsating heartwood of the tree and plunged both silver blades into it up to the hilts. A deafening crack echoed through the ruins. The entire giant tree shuddered. From the wounds left by the blades poured not sap, but a thick, dark fluid like blood. The illusions vanished. The surrounding swamp creatures froze, then scattered with hisses, diving into the water, crawling into the reeds. The Bog Mother roared in pain and fury. Its body convulsed, scales flaking off to reveal pale, decaying flesh beneath. It took a few steps towards me, reaching out a clawed hand, but then its strength failed. It collapsed into the water, sending up a cloud of spray and muck, and slowly sank into the bog. The priest screamed in rage and despair. He charged me, staff leveled. I easily deflected his attack and swatted him against the roots of the dying tree with a backhand blow. His head hit stone and he fell silent. Silence. Only the bubbling water where the Bog Mother had sunk and the groans of the wounded soldiers. Miller, Hendricks, and Chen were alive, though battered. We had won. I approached the priest. He was still breathing, but faintly. I tore off his hood. Beneath it was the face of an old man with crazed eyes and skin like tanned leather. On his chest hung another amulet, a piece of gray stone carved with the symbol of a mountain peak shrouded in mist. "The mountains. Call," he rasped, a bloody smile twisting his lips. "The Fog Father will awaken. He will sweep you all away." He coughed and was gone forever. Mountains. The Fog Father. Appalachia. The next branch of hunger. The next shard of the madman's prophecy. I pulled my blades from the heart of the cypress. The tree was dying quietly, its leaves yellowing and falling before my eyes. We called for extraction. Leaving that cursed place, I felt not only exhaustion but growing anxiety. Dogmen, swamp creatures. This was just the beginning. What awaited us in the Appalachian Mountains could be something far older and more powerful. And the beast within me, sated on the blood of swamp things, already felt the call of a new, even more dangerous hunt. Appalachia met us with a sky the color of wet asphalt and a cold rain that chilled to the bone. The helicopter bucked and yawed as it pushed through thick layers of fog clinging to the mountain peaks like a shroud. Below stretched an endless ocean of dark green forest, ancient as the land itself. There was no sun-scorched wasteland of Arizona or the cloying, suffocating mire of Louisiana. Here reigned stone, wood, and an eternal oppressive gloom. We landed in a small clearing at the foot of a mountain the locals called Fog Ridge. The rain immediately soaked us through. The new support team, 4 soldiers under Lieutenant Carver, a grim man with a square jaw and a scar above his eyebrow, moved quickly and professionally, deploying gear. But even through their composure, nervousness seeped out. The mountains pressed in. The silence, broken only by the sound of rain and wind in the pines, felt unnatural, tense. The first alarm bell rang almost immediately. "No comms, sir," the radio man reported, frowning at his display. "GPS is out too, like we're in a dead zone." Carver swore under his breath. "Check the gear. That's impossible." But it was true. We were cut off from the outside world. No satellite link, no radio, just us, the mountains, and whatever hid within them. The isolation was almost instant and absolute. The beast inside me stirred, sensing a trap. A local guide met us, an old man named Silas, who lived as a hermit in a nearby cabin. His face was lined like the bark of an old oak, and his faded blue eyes held a weary wisdom. He wasn't surprised by our arrival. It seemed he'd been expecting us. "It's walkin' again," he said when Carver tried to question him about the missing hikers and a local logger. "The Fog Father has woken. The mountains ain't happy." He spoke quietly, almost whispering as if afraid of being overheard. "The Fog Father?" Carver repeated. Silas nodded, gazing somewhere into the distance at the fog-hidden peaks. "That's what the old ones called him. Mountain folk. You call him Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Wild Man. Names change, the thing's the same. Spirit of these mountains. Big as a grizzly but walks on 2 legs. Strong enough to rip trees out by the roots. And smart, cunning. He can stand 10 feet away and you won't see him. Furs the color of wet earth and rock. Blends with the forest, the fog. He's part of these mountains." "We're looking for the missing people, Silas," Carver insisted. "And whatever attacked them." "The Fog Father took them," the old man shook his head. "Or his children. They showed up too. Smaller, but meaner. Throw rocks, roar loud enough to freeze your blood. Seen 'em near the old Black Creek mine. Abandoned long ago. Bad place. Ground's hungry there, like that fella from the swamp said." He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw not fear, but a strange understanding. He knew I wasn't like the others. Black Creek mine. Fragmentary intel, the dying priest's words in Louisiana, and now the old man's story all pointed there. Everything converged on one spot. The trek to the mine was arduous. Rain turned the trails into muddy slicks. Fog hung thick, reducing visibility to a few feet. We moved slowly, pushing through dense undergrowth. The air was damp, smelling of decaying leaves, wet earth, and something else. A strong, musky scent, like wet dog fur, but much sharper and wilder. The trail. It was fresh, and very large. Prints in the mud were enormous, deep, clearly left by a bipedal creature of incredible weight. The entrance to Black Creek Mine looked like the maw of an underground beast. A partially collapsed timber portal overgrown with moss and vines. Cold, dampness, and the same musky odor drifted from the darkness, mixed with the stale stench of blood and familiar ritual incense. "Check perimeter, prep gear," Carver ordered. I moved closer to the entrance. My enhanced vision pierced the gloom. The tunnel walls just inside were covered in symbols. Familiar runes of the hungry, but much older than those I'd seen in Montana or Arizona. They were carved deep into the stone, covered with the patina of time. The cult had established itself here long ago, very long ago, perhaps decades or even longer. We entered. Flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing rusted ore carts, rotted timbers, deep puddles on the floor. The mine descended into the mountain, branching into numerous dark, narrow tunnels. The musky scent grew stronger. I could hear it. Quiet, heavy breathing, and the scrape of claws on rock, somewhere ahead. "Move carefully. Fingers on triggers," Carver whispered into his uselessly hissing comms. We'd gone about 300 feet down the main drift when a crash and a short, terrified cry echoed from a side tunnel, followed by a deafening roar, low, guttural, full of primal fury. It reverberated through the tunnels, freezing us in place. "What was that?" whispered one of Carver's men, his voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, rocks started flying at us from the darkness ahead. Large, fist-sized stones slammed against the walls and floor. And then they appeared. Two figures burst from the darkness of side passages, blocking our path forward and back. They were shorter and less massive than Silas's description of the Fog Father, but still huge, easily 9 or 10 feet tall, covered in thick, matted, dark brown fur, with long arms nearly reaching their knees and powerful legs. Their faces were hidden in shadow, only burning yellow eyes visible. Lesser Bigfoots. Children of the Fog Father. They didn't attack immediately. They roared, beat their chests through rocks, trying to intimidate, to separate us. The soldiers opened fire. Bullets hit home, but the creatures only roared louder, retreating into the darkness of side tunnels only to reappear moments later from another direction. They were using the mine as their battlefield, knowing every turn, every niche. "With me! Into that drift!" Carver shouted, pointing to a narrow side tunnel on the left. We scrambled towards it, firing back. One of the creatures blocked our path, swinging a huge piece of rusted rebar it had found somewhere in the mine. I charged it, already partially transformed. My claws met the rebar, a shower of sparks. I deflected the blow and slammed into the creature's chest, knocking it back. The other soldiers slipped into the side tunnel. I followed, but the second creature hurled an enormous rock at me. I managed to dodge, but the rock struck the tunnel ceiling above my head. A deafening crack. Rocks and dust rained down. The ceiling began to sag. "Barkley!" Carver's shout came from somewhere behind a wall of dust and falling rock. I leaped back into the main drift just moments before the passage to the side tunnel collapsed completely, cutting me off from the rest of the group. I was alone, in the dark. Between me and the exit stood two enraged creatures, and somewhere ahead, deeper in the mine, I heard him. Heavy, measured footsteps, and a low, guttural rumbling that vibrated the very stone beneath my feet. The Fog Father. He was coming, and he was much closer than I thought. The beast within me snarled, not in rage, but in anticipation of a clash with something truly ancient and powerful. I was trapped between a rock and a hard place, and felt the mountain gloom closing in. The cave-in cut me off, plunging me into near absolute darkness and silence, broken only by the echoing fall of rocks and my own ragged breath. The two smaller creatures were behind me, near the entrance, and ahead, deeper in the mine, he approached, the Fog Father. Survival instinct screamed, "Run! Find another way out! Wait, try to reach Carver!" But the beast within demanded otherwise. It sensed the main enemy, the alpha of this cursed mountain, and craved the confrontation. And there was the job. The orders: neutralize the threat. I moved deeper, trying to step quietly. Though my paws, the transformation was set now, I didn't fight it, still made a faint scraping sound on the stone. The mine grew older. Wooden supports gave way to roughly hewn stone pillars. Tunnels widened into cavern-like chambers. The Fog Father's musky scent mingled here with something else. The smell of dust, ancient dampness, and old metal. I stumbled upon it by accident, turning into a side passage to avoid a direct encounter with the approaching heavy steps. It wasn't just a chamber. It was an altar room. A vast cavern, dominated by a crude stone pedestal coated in dried blood and familiar runes of the hungry. Bones, human and animal, lay scattered around, piled into grotesque pyramids. Carvings adorned the walls. Not just cult symbols, but scenes of hunts, sacrifices, and centrally, a giant figure of a Bigfoot standing on a mountaintop beneath a blood-red moon with tiny human figures kneeling at its feet. The cult revered this creature as a deity, but the strangest thing was in the far corner of the cavern. There, under layers of dust and debris, were the remnants of a laboratory, old rusted equipment, similar to things I'd seen in archives of old medical research, glass flasks with murky contents, metal cages far sturdier and more technologically advanced than anything the cultists could have built, and documents. A folder of weathered leather, almost crumbling with age. I carefully opened it. The paper was yellowed and brittle, but some text and diagrams were legible. Reports dated back to the early 1920s. An expedition into Appalachia, study of anomalous fauna, attempts to capture and research primate giants. On one page was a stamp, an eagle with crossed lightning bolts, and an acronym I couldn't quite make out. But it vaguely resembled the symbols of early U.S. intelligence agencies. A chill traced my spine. The government, the military. They knew about these creatures almost a century ago. They tried to capture them, study them, possibly weaponize them. Just like Cross and Project Lycanthrope were using me. The lines began to blur. Cultists worshipping monsters, sacrificing to them, and secret government projects creating or using other monsters for their own ends. How different were they really? Playing with ancient powers, with things man was never meant to touch. My conviction in the righteousness of my own mission wavered. I was a weapon, but in whose hands? And who was the real enemy in this war? The heavy footsteps drew closer. I hid the folder under some debris and concealed myself in the shadow behind a stone pillar. They entered the cavern. Not the Fog Father. Cultists, 5 of them. In dirty, torn robes, armed with whatever they could find, rusty machetes, an old shotgun. They dragged another captive with them, a young man in hiking gear, likely the last of the missing. They hauled him towards the altar. One, apparently the leader tall, with fanatically burning eyes, drew a curved ritual knife. They were going to finish what their predecessors started in Montana, Arizona, and Louisiana. Feed their god. Fully awaken its fury. "The Fog Father waits. Blood will clear the path," the leader proclaimed, raising the knife. I burst from the shadows. No time for doubt or philosophical questions. There was a man to save, an enemy to stop. The cultists didn't expect an attack from the depths of their sanctuary. I took down the first 2 with swipes of my clawed paws before they could react. The third fired the shotgun. Buckshot hit my chest, causing sharp pain, but regeneration was already kicking in. I knocked the gun from his hands and sent him sprawling. The leader with the knife and the last cultist charged me. But it wasn't a fight. It was a slaughter. The beast, roused by the Fog Father's proximity and the scent of blood, took over. Seconds later, it was finished. 5 cultists lay on the cavern floor, their blood mingling with the ancient stains on the altar. I cut the captive's ropes, He stared at me in horror, unable to comprehend whether I was a savior or just another monster. "Run!" I growled, trying to make my voice sound as human as possible. "Run for the exit there. Might be others." The young man nodded and scrambled away, stumbling out of the cavern. And that's when they got me. As I turned, watching him go, something struck my legs from behind. An unseen force slammed me to the ground. I tried to get up, but my body was seized by sudden weakness. Claws retracted involuntarily, fur began to recede. The transformation reversed, forcibly, painfully. 2 more cultists emerged from the shadows I hadn't noticed. They held strange artifacts, black stones emitting a faint, nauseating radiation, covered in runes that glowed with a dull violet light. They surrounded me, creating a field that suppressed my powers. "Caught you, lycanthrope," one hissed, approaching with a chain. "Your power is useless here. The mountain doesn't like your kind." The beast within roared in fury and helplessness, but my body wouldn't obey. I felt my strength draining away, human weakness returning. "Sergeant!" Carver's familiar voice. He and one of his men. Hendricks appeared in the cavern entrance. They were battered but alive. Apparently, they'd found another way out of the collapse. Bursts of automatic fire ripped through the silence. The cultists with the artifacts dropped, reacting too late. The suppression field vanished. Strength began to return, but slowly. "Quick, Barkley. He's coming." We heard him in the upper tunnels. "He's smashing his way to the surface," Carver shouted, helping me up. The Fog Father. He hadn't waited for the sacrifice. He was heading outside, into the thickening fog, where the sky prepared to unleash a storm, where the final battle would take place. We emerged from the suffocating darkness of the mine onto a narrow rock plateau overlooking a deep gorge. The sky had turned black. Wind howled between the rocks, carrying sheets of icy rain. Fog swirled so thick that visibility was no more than 30 or 40 feet. Static electricity crackled in the air. A thunderstorm was imminent. Perfect conditions for the mountain spirit's arrival. He was already there. His silhouette loomed vaguely in the fog, immense, dark, motionless, like part of the rock itself, the Fog Father. Silas hadn't exaggerated. He was gigantic, at least 12, maybe 14 feet tall. His body was covered in thick, matted fur the color of wet granite, blending with the surroundings. Long, powerful arms hung nearly to his knees, ending in huge hands with thick, claw-like nails. His face was hidden in the shadow of a heavy brow ridge and thick fur. But I saw his eyes, small, deep-set, burning with a dim, ancient intelligence. He wasn't just a beast. There was a sense of age-old wisdom and the primal fury of nature itself about him. He stood near the edge of the plateau, looking down into the gorge as if waiting for something. The musky scent radiating from him was strong enough to steal my breath. "All units, take positions. Fire at will," Carver commanded. He, Hendricks, and I spread out behind boulders, the only cover on this patch of rock. Attempts to call for air support failed. Comms were still dead. We were alone against the god of the mountain. Hendricks opened fire first. The heavy machine gun roared, tracers slicing through the fog. Bullets struck the monster's back and shoulder, tearing out clumps of fur, but he didn't even flinch. He slowly turned his massive head, his gaze fixing on us. There was no pain or fear in it, only cold, ancient annoyance. He let out a roar, not high-pitched like the Wendigos, nor barking like the Dogmans. It was a deep, low rumble that vibrated the rocks beneath our feet and seemed to thicken the air. The roar merged with a clap of thunder that struck somewhere very close. And then he attacked. He didn't run. He simply took several swift, heavy strides, closing the distance with terrifying speed. He ripped a massive boulder from the ground, one the three of us couldn't have budged, and hurled it towards Hendricks. The soldier barely managed to roll aside as the rock obliterated his machine gun nest. Carver poured fire from his assault rifle, aiming for the head. Bullets hit, but the Bigfoot merely shook its head like a bull shooing flies. Its wounds closed visibly, leaving only dark patches on its thick fur. The cultist's ritual, though incomplete, had granted it monstrous regeneration. He swung one of his enormous arms, aiming for Carver. I surged forward, already fully transformed. The beast roared within, drunk on the storm's proximity and the opponent's power. I slammed into the monster's arm, trying to deflect the blow. I felt incredible force, like hitting a moving truck. It threw me back, but the strike missed Carver. A dance of death began in the fog and lightning flashes. I was faster, more agile. I circled the giant, striking with silver blades at its legs, joints, trying to slow it, find a weak spot. Silver hurt him. He roared when the blades burned his flesh, leaving smoking wounds that healed slower than the others. But he was too strong, too massive. Each of his blows could be my last. He smashed rocks, tore chunks from the cliff face, throwing them at me. Carver and Hendricks, who had switched his shattered machine gun for a rifle, supported me with covering fire, distracting the monster, but their bullets were little more than mosquito bites. "Need something bigger," Carver yelled over the wind and thunder. "We've got a couple of C4 charges." The plan formed instantly. Desperate, insane, but the only option. Distract, lure, detonate. "Cover me!" I roared at Carver and launched myself at the giant with renewed fury. I latched onto its leg, tearing with claws and fangs, sinking silver deep. It roared, trying to shake me off, slammed me against the rock face. The world spun, pain shot through my body, but I didn't let go. I had to hold it in place while Carver planted the charges near the edge of the plateau, under an overhanging rock ledge. The Bigfoot lifted me off the ground, preparing to crush me. I saw its eyes up close, ancient, filled with elemental rage. In that moment, I completely unleashed the beast. No control, no thought. Only pure instinct, pure fury, the will to survive. My body crackled, muscles bulged further, claws lengthened. I roared directly into its face, and it flinched back for an instant, surprised by this savage, primal energy. That instant was enough. "Set!" Carver's yell. I kicked off the monster's chest and rolled away. Carver hit the detonator. A deafening explosion rocked the plateau. The rock ledge above us collapsed, tons of stone crashing down onto the spot where the Bigfoot stood. A cloud of dust and smoke billowed up, mingling with the fog. When the dust settled, we saw the result. The giant lay beneath the rockfall, its huge body twisted, crushed. It wasn't moving. The silence, broken only by the rain and distant thunder, felt absolute. We had won. I stood, breathing heavily, my body covered in wounds, blood matting my fur, mixing with the rainwater. The transformation slowly receded, leaving aching pain and a hollow emptiness behind. The beast within exulted, but the man was devastated. In the distance, breaking through the clouds, came the familiar thrum of a helicopter. They'd finally made it through. Cross would be on the line in a minute, saying the mission was accomplished, the threat neutralized, for now, back in the vault. Back to the sterility of the medical bay. Back to the smell of ozone and antiseptics. But everything felt different now. The wounds on my body healed quickly. Regeneration worked flawlessly. But inside something had finally broken. Or perhaps fused into something new and terrifying. The beast was no longer a separate entity I fought against. It had become part of me. I felt it constantly. in my heightened senses, in the strength pulsing beneath my skin, in the hunger that now never truly subsided. Returning to human form required increasing effort of will, and even then, I perceived the world differently, sharper, louder, more dangerous. The moon's scar had become part of my soul. The debrief with Cross was brief and businesslike. He sat across from me in the briefing room, his face as impenetrable as ever. 3 hotspots suppressed, Sergeant. Dogmen, swamp devils, Fogfather, neutralized. The Hungry network in the U.S. has sustained significant damage. He paused. But this isn't over. Our analysts confirm similar signatures in Canada, and there's disturbing intel from South America, the Amazon basin. He watched me assessingly, like examining a tool, checking its readiness for further use. Not a word about the losses. Not a word about what I'd been through. Not a word about my condition. Your effectiveness has exceeded expectations, he continued in his level voice. You've become the weapon we counted on. Weapon. Yes, that's exactly what I felt like. Lethal, effective, but not alive. The memory of the old documents in the mine, of government experiments a century ago, surfaced. Who were the hungry? Who were we? 2 sides of the same coin, playing with a fire that could burn down the world? I'm ready for the next mission, sir, I said, my voice sounding hollow, alien. What else could I say? This was the price for my cure, my job, my fate. Cross nodded. Good. Rest. New orders will follow shortly. He left, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I walked to the one-way mirror, knowing someone was always watching from the other side. In the reflection, I saw a tired human face. But the eyes... A yellow spark smoldered in their depths. The eyes of the beast. Work was already underway in the vault's labs, analyzing tissue samples from the monsters, deciphering the cultists' ritual texts, developing new serums, new protocols. Out of the corner of my eye, passing one of the containment units, I noticed a new cryo chamber. Number 15. Were they already preparing the next generation? Or a replacement for me should I finally break? I clenched my fists. Aiden Barkley, the combat medic, was gone. There was only the lycanthrope, the weapon, the predator, an eternal beast beneath an eternal moon, doomed to an endless hunt in the darkness where the lines blurred between monsters and those who hunt them. And the next hunt was already calling, promising new blood, new fury, and new scars on my ravaged soul. The war was just beginning.